Cap off yet another busy week of people, power, and politics. I'm Rupraj. We're really glad you're making us a part of your nightly routine, or perhaps you're watching this the next day streaming. You know, it's such an important election year, a critical time, and we've got a lot to get to tonight, so let's dig right in. First off, some good news that can bring the whole country together. We're hearing from Novi native Paul Whelan and Wall Street reporter Evan Gershkovich, two of the people you see in this picture here, finally back home on American soil along with the others after far too long behind bars in Russia. And we're checking in with Pollster Steve Mitchell about the impact this Russian prisoner swap, as well as Vice President Harris's VP pick could have on the election. All of that's coming up in just a few minutes here. But first, let's dive right in to the sweepstakes. We know VP Harris will be in Detroit, in the Motor City, next week. And she's supposed to be alongside her running mate, whoever that mystery person is, right here in Detroit. As for who that is, well, bluntly, we just don't know yet. For the record, we have formally asked to interview VP Harris when she comes here on Wednesday. And we've interviewed her before 2 other times, and it was an exclusive here at Fox 2. So let's see if we can make it a 3rd time at this critical time by Wednesday. All the speculation got us curious, though, about how much the vice presidential pick on either side of the aisle actually impacts your vote. So we went out to get a pulse check. When was the last time it mattered to you? Take a look.
Oh, they always matter. Like, even before I was able to vote, it always mattered because I knew how important it was to get involved in the politics and actually go vote.
You know, it's really the president that really sways my vote. The VP can help with, you know, helping the House and Senate and all that stuff, but really the president's the main guy. So not really. I think the president would.
I think my opinion has always been the same. Like, everything has always mattered to me, what goes on. So, always.
Interesting perspective. Some people say, you know, I only vote for the president. I don't vote for the VP. We also asked you the question online, how much does the VP pick impact your vote? Here are the results on your screen, and my 47-year-old eyes will read this correctly this time around. Not at all. 60% say not at all, just a little, 14%, and a lot, 26%. That's how much it matters, the VP. So a good chunk of you say a lot. If you want to weigh in, you can still do that. Just pick up your phone right now, go over to that QR code on your screen, tap that, and you will see the poll. You can actually chime in. As for Twitterverse right now, David Gifford replied to my tweet saying 0. VPs are usually overshadowed by the president, but after the way Pence correctly handled certifying the votes and Harris got tagged in to run for president, I guess the VP pick should mean a little more to me. Empire also has a lot to say, and you'll see what she says here. It was when I voted for McCain. Not too worried about Harris, anyone that will push her over the top in the swing states. So this person obviously a supporter. But while we wait for that official announcement, there is actually more reason to believe that Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro could very well be VP Harris's running mate. Watch a politician's schedule. It's something I've learned in politics, and it says a lot about what they're up to and what they may be up to in the next few days, weeks, and perhaps even months. Shapiro, you see, was supposed to attend 2 fundraising events in the Hamptons this weekend, but he's canceled them. And I checked the weather, no problems, no hurricanes, no tropical storms, just cancel the events. All of this as VP Harris is planning to announce her running mate in Pennsylvania on Tuesday. A spokesperson for Shapiro said simply that the governor's schedule changed, so he's no longer going to the Hamptons. Now, adding to that fire, this video by Philly Mayor Sherelle Parker. Take a look.
Getting behind Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris for president. And Josh Shapiro.
Josh Shapiro.
Josh Shapiro for vice president.
Okay, that's pretty blatant, right? So you can see why people were talking there. That video was released, by the way, on Mayor Parker's Instagram. A source close to her told the Philadelphia Inquirer, it's not an announcement, just the mayor showing support for a friend. And again, to be clear, there's been no official announcement yet. But there's no doubt how important Pennsylvania is in this election. It's a key swing state carrying 19 electoral votes. And all of this smoke means it's time for a pulse deep dive into Pennsylvania governor, his life and his career, to see if perhaps there's some fire to this pick. Shapiro, by the way, 51 years old, 8 years younger than VP Harris. He's married with 4 kids. He grew up in the Keystone State, so he's a hometown guy. He attended the University of Rochester and then got his law degree from Georgetown. Now, before he was elected governor, he was a state representative between 2005 and 2011. Then he was elected chair of the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners, which, by the way, that area that borders Philadelphia. Then in 2017, he was elected the state's attorney general, where he served before being elected governor. So there's an interesting similarity here, if you really think about it, between Vice President Harris, who, as you know, was the attorney general in California, and what he has done here. And oftentimes when people pick people, they look for people who mirror their skill set. So this is all analysis and, yes, guesswork, but she's making the announcement in Pennsylvania, probably going to be someone from Pennsylvania, right? Well, this is all coming at us the same day the DNC chair says Harris has enough delegates to become the party's nominee for president. And we expect her announcement sometime within the next few days, in fact, by Tuesday. And you know, we have you covered right here on The Pulse. Harris did hit the ground running after getting such a late start in the race, but I want to show you some fundraising numbers, and this is going to show you how clear the voters understand the need that this candidate has in such a short time to raise a lot of money. These are staggering numbers, okay? These are historic numbers. Whether you like her or you don't, the Harris campaign says they raked in $310 million in July alone, last month. And they have even more than that on hand to start this month. Compare that to the other side of the ticket, where former President Trump, who's a very popular candidate, raises a lot of money. The campaign says they took in a little less than $139 million, having about $50 million less on hand than the Harris campaign does to start this month. But the Trump camp will tell you it's because she came in running and there was a switch with the candidate. And so there's a lot of energy behind her. Now, the other big story we've been following, Novi native Paul Whelan, finally free after spending 6 years behind bars in Russia, accused of espionage. He was released as part of a massive prisoner swap. These are pictures we showed you live here on The Pulse last night. The video you're seeing here is after he arrived on U.S. soil. He spoke just moments after that, saying he's really grateful for the support from people all over the world.
Thank you for all your prayers, your good wishes. Thanks for doing everything you did. It all helped. So I had thousands and thousands of letters and cards coming in. So many that the FSB stopped giving them to me. But yeah, there are people all over the world, and they were sending in small amounts of money in their letters. There was just tons and tons of support. You couldn't believe it. I went on a 2-week vacation. The FSB grabbed me, said I was a spy. I'm apparently a general in the Army, a secret agent for DIA. This is the nonsense narrative they came up with. They wouldn't let it go. So, this is how Putin runs his government. This is how Putin runs his country. Yeah, I'm glad I'm home. Yeah. I'm never going back there again.
Home in America, not home in Novi just yet. Another one of those freed prisoners, Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich. He'd been held since last year, and like Whelan, it was hugs all around, and even the president hugging him and the vice president doing the same. But he also said, we need to remember the people who are still imprisoned in that country.
Evan, how did you feel about the news?
I got a hug from my buddy Andrew. Oh, bud. Oh.
Evan, what you can ask to stay in the Russia, in the prison? Tell me, please.
Right.
Evan, can you ask, please, to stay in the Russia now in the prison? What you can ask?
I think we shouldn't forget about them. There's one thing I'd like to say. It was great to get on that bus today and see a lot of, not just Americans and Germans, but Russian prisoners. But I just spent a month in prison in Yekaterinburg, where there's a whole, basically everybody I sat with is a political prisoner.
I can't imagine what they went through, what they felt, the fear that they had. So many reunions last night, smiles and hugs all around. Welcome home to everyone who's finally free and back on American soil, especially, by the way, to our own Paul Whelan, who, by the way, his parents are in the small town of Manchester out in Washtenaw County, and they're celebrating, as they well should, and they'll be very happy to see their son. Turning our attention now to former President Trump, the New York Court of Appeals upheld his gag order in the case, meaning he still can't talk about the prosecutors, court staffers, or their families until sentencing. That's supposed to happen September 18th, but it's up in the air with the Supreme Court's ruling that Trump has broad immunity from prosecution for what they call official acts. The defense requested the conviction be tossed. A judge is now weighing that request. And about that Supreme Court ruling, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is trying to invalidate that ruling. He's introduced what he's calling the No Kings Act, which would basically declare presidents are not immune from criminal law. It would allow Congress to have discretion over federal criminal law, taking that power away from these men and women from the court. Now, the court made that ruling along ideological lines, which threw the Justice Department election interference case against Trump in a lot of doubt. And it's something that's come up a lot as we roll through this election. How can we get back to decency in American politics? We're sitting down with a Republican mayor from Metro Detroit who says we have to focus on policy and not the person, not their race, not their gender. But before we go to break, I asked you if that was even possible. Here's what some of you were telling me. Jeff replied saying, unfortunately, no. He added, quote, this country is so divided by politics and general thinking with zero give and take, nor discussion. We all hear about friendships and our families ripped apart over such discussions or beliefs. Anna chimed in. She thinks it'll take a long time and likely something tragic. She added, quote, I have my own theories on how we got here, but I'll let 2024 play out first. Topic that comes up pretty often, and it has the last few weeks, getting back to decency in politics. Joining us now to talk about that is a Republican mayor from the city of Troy, Ethan Baker. And Mayor Baker, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse.
Roop, I'm really excited to be here. I'm so happy for you in the show. I think it's awesome. So
thank you. Well, we appreciate it. And it's nice to have you here because we always say we put people over pundits. And I was teasing you. I was joking with you. I said, the mayor of the city of Troy is not professing to be a pundit, but you're not just a regular citizen. You're the mayor. But you had an interesting take on this whole thing. And I know you're not an expert on the national political scene, but you are an avid political watcher. You say that just because Kamala Harris will be in Pennsylvania doesn't necessarily mean that it should be Josh Shapiro. Talk about that.
No, I think it's too obvious, right? I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, maybe they're going for obvious, and that's been the pick all along. But
would it be weird to bring out like Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona in Pennsylvania and say, this is my guy?
My guess is Kamala Harris polls really well in Philadelphia and the surrounding counties, and that's an important place anywhere that she needs to be. So I don't know. I remember Sarah Palin got rolled out, I think, in Ohio with John McCain.
So it's just a matter of where.
But it could be totally wrong. Could be, I don't know.
It's
very
anyone's
obvious,
guess.
right?
Nothing is obvious and nothing has been predictable in this particular cycle. But the only thing that has been predictable, sadly, is the decorum that you see, and not just from the politicians themselves, but from people on social media and elsewhere. When you, as a public leader and as someone who's the mayor of a city, you wrote something pretty impactful. You said that a large portion of the people who work in your city are women and are people who are minorities, and we shouldn't be marginalizing people in those roles. Talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, I think it's really important. As the mayor of the city, look, Troy is 29% foreign-born. We're very diverse. We're very proud of that. But not only that, you know, I've served for 5 years as mayor. My first 4 years, I served with 5 women who were members of council and just one other man and me. One of them was African American, one of them was Chaldean. We never focused on, you know, their gender or their ethnic heritage or any of their cultural backgrounds. It was really about the work they'd done. And they were some of the smartest, most thoughtful, best council members we've ever had in the city of Troy. So I think it's a really big mistake to make this presidential election about whether or not Kamala Harris is a woman. We know she is. Whether or not she's black or half black or Indian, we know those things to be the case. Let's focus on the record of both the vice president and also the former president. I think that our society will be much better off if we can do that.
Wouldn't we benefit as the electorate, as voters, if there was a way for both of the parties to kind of put some of this away for a moment and talk about policy? Because ultimately, and you tell me, you run for office. What do people care about? What do people on the streets really care about? Do they care if someone's half Indian, half black, whether or not the former president thinks one way or the other of them? It matters what they're going to do for us, right?
Ultimately, and what they have done. So look at both of these candidates now have records that are pretty clear, and it's really easy to figure them out. I think, it's a little different in local politics. First of all, I mean, full disclosure, right? What I do at the city of Troy is very different than what happens at the national level. So I think people are a little more dialed into local issues when it relates to their politicians and the candidates running. But we need to focus on the records of these people. They're so stark and so obvious, and I think that Republicans make a big mistake, or are potentially making a big mistake, to focus on Kamala Harris and what she looks like or what she sounds like, as opposed to what she's done or hasn't done. She's very beatable as a candidate based on her record. And I'm a Republican, yes. I'm also the nonpartisan mayor of the city of Troy. My charter says that I have to stay nonpartisan. But I know as a Republican, we could do much better in this November election if we're focused on the policies of the vice president and not who she is as a person.
If you take a look at the policies of both former President Trump and Kamala Harris, you said it best. They're so stark. I know that Ms. Harris, the vice president, has been kind of left of center on a lot of her deals when it comes to the Green New Deal, climate change, all kinds of stuff. Wouldn't it benefit former President Trump to go after that and take the time and the oxygen to talk about that rather than this, right? That's what you're saying.
I think, and I think he has, and I think he's also waded into some of the other stuff. he's President Trump. He does a lot of things that make us kind of scratch our heads sometimes. That's no question. But yeah.
But are people going to scratch their heads enough with his rhetoric and with some of the things that he says that they're going to finally, the people who are on the fence, say, you know what, I don't know if I want to vote for him? I mean, it's hurting him in a sense, isn't it?
And I think maybe that's what happened in like the city of Troy and Oakland County in 2020 and a lot of these suburban counties throughout the country. I mean, it seems to me that suburban counties that are heavily dominated by women who are voting, people of color, they don't respond well to those kind of personal attacks. And if you really talk about the policies and the issues, you're much more likely to garner their support and get their vote.
Carville said years ago, of course, a couple decades ago, is the economy stupid? Yeah. The pocketbook issues are really, they're important to people. Ultimately, what do you think it is? Is it going to be that which will drive people to the polls and also make a decision based on the economy?
I think the economy still is it's always people's biggest indicator, what gets them to the polls for the most part. There's a lot going on now, right? I mean, the media plays a big role in what's in everyone's faces. Everyone's got their phones out, gets kind of news updates all the time, so people are really inundated with information. But the economy is important. I think immigration is hugely important. Again, 29% foreign-born in the city of Troy. We face immigration issues, not like we face at the southern border, but immigration is always on the minds of our voters in the city of Troy. You know, the standard issues are also important. Healthcare, some of the women's rights. Although if you look at the statistic, I saw a Frank Luntz poll that showed how different people view those different issues. Abortion is really low on the list for certain voters. It's high for some, but for a lot of people, it ranks pretty low. So it's not always about the reproductive rights that the Democrats are talking about so much that I think is going to drive this election. I
want you to zoom out. You said you're the nonpartisan mayor who is a Republican, though. When you make policy decisions, you work with Democrats all the time on stuff. But I do want to make this clear that as a Republican, you probably have a strong opinion about this. What are some of the biggest mistakes that both the candidates have to avoid? Start with Kamala Harris.
Oh, I think she needs to. I mean, her record again is very clear. There's things that show that she was the most liberal member of the United States Senate when she was a senator. I think she needs to really move to the middle on some of these issues and show people that she's not the liberal, Green New Deal type politician. That she's actually somebody that cares about your pocketbook, cares about people in our suburban communities in the Midwest. I mean, she really needs to do a lot of work in the Midwest to show that she's somebody that's going to be viable here.
And is that why the VP pick is more important, to find someone who's more moderate?
I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, I think it's hugely important, although Pennsylvania's not really if it is Shapiro, he's not really a Midwest governor. But I think that's why you saw so much interest in even Gretchen Whitmer, our governor, Governor Walz in Minnesota. Mark Kelly in Arizona is a different strategy, I think, but that's also, again, that goes to the immigration issue and how important that issue is for people. So I think the vice president needs to focus on, the things that were done well under the Biden-Harris administration, which there were some, obviously. I mean, as a Republican, sure. I can even say.
Well, and I know where you stand with that. And but let's talk about the other side. Yeah. Former President Trump. What are some mistakes that he has to avoid right now?
Well, it's hard for me to kind of psychoanalyze President Trump and to deal with what he is.
But maybe policy-wise.
Policy-wise, I mean, again, he seems to poll really well when he talks about the economy, when he talks about immigration. I can't tell you, everybody who goes to the grocery store feels the pain, or the pain at the pump at the gas stations. Whether or not President Trump can solve those problems, I don't know, but he seems to be making a pretty good case that he can, or that people remember what it was like before COVID when he was president, that things were cheaper, easier to get, and things were a lot better in a lot of ways.
Whether you disagree or you agree with what this Republican mayor has to say, I think we all can get on board with what you started with, which is there's a decorum and decency this country was built on. If we can return to that, it shouldn't matter that I'm an Indian American anchor or a kid from Troy or whatever it is, 100%. Or that you're a white man. It matters what you bring to the table. Ethan Baker, the mayor of City of Detroit, thanks for joining us here today. Back on the Pulse, we were still talking about that interview with Mayor Baker, my floor crew and I, Vito and I, sitting here talking about how nice it is, how refreshing it is. Just be a little bit nicer to each other. As we dive into everything people, power, and politics, between vice presidential speculation as well as a prisoner swap with Russia that brought more than a dozen Americans home, it's been a whirlwind week. And we want to take a closer look at how all of this could impact the election. Steve Mitchell, the head of Mitchell Research and Communications Incorporated, worked for the Reagan-Bush campaign in 1984. We asked him if yesterday's news could play in VP Harris's favor in November. Here's what he said.
Some people questioned whether or not she really was a part of it, but Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, said today that she met with Chancellor Scholz in Germany earlier this year, and they discussed that, and that she's been part of the negotiations. To answer the question as to what impact that will have on the race, we have a candidate who was almost assassinated, who stood up with blood on his face, a flag in the background saying, "Fight, fight, fight," and that lasted about a week. there's a very short memory on the voters, and I suspect at the end of the day, that particular issue, although it makes her look much more presidential, is not going to have an impact any more than President Trump's being almost assassinated.
Steve, how important is the VP choice for someone like Vice President Harris? Is it critical, or is it just kind of like window dressing?
The vice presidential choice is always important at about the time the vice presidential choice is made. It's also important when there's a debate. But at the end of the day, voters go and vote for the candidate for president. They're going to vote for either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. They're not going to vote for J.D. Vance or for whomever Vice President Harris selects to be her running mate.
Do political ads really work? They obviously do. That's why they're spending all that money. And do negative ads work?
Well, the reason you see so many negative ads is because negative ads work. You know, it's interesting. We're really looking at a very small minority of voters that you're going after. Essentially, you know, you've got about 80 to 85% of the voters who are dug in and entrenched. They're either going to vote for Donald Trump or they're going to vote for Kamala Harris. And so you really want to find ads that go after that narrow group of undecided voters or swing voters who ultimately make the decision in politics as to who's going to get elected.
A lot to unpack there, and there's going to be a lot more to unpack as we roll along this election season.